Hi, my name is Beth Ann Zinkovich, and for my Keystone project, I wrote a collection of songs that consists entirely of music in the style of Anglican chant. The music of each chant in the collection mimics a typical chant that one would hear sung at an Anglican church service, but the texts address different political, social, and environmental issues, hence, chant for change. The primary methodologies of this project are music composition and performance. So, what is Anglican chant? Anglican chant is a genre of English church music that comes from the Anglican tradition. Typically, Anglican chants are used to sing psalms from the Bible during principal church services. Though perhaps the most important thing to understand about Anglican chant is that the rhythm of the text is meant to mimic the natural cadence of speech. So, unlike a lot of Western music that follows strictly notated rhythms, the rhythmic patterns of Anglican chant are much less definite. We'll explore more of what this looks like later on. So here's an example of what a traditional Anglican chant sounds like. You can follow along with the lyrics on the right side of the screen. So I think it's pretty easy to hear that this genre certainly has a place in the church. Now, my own personal interest in Anglican chant is relatively new. I began attending an Anglican church only about a year and a half ago, and it was then that I first learned about Anglican chant. As a music major, this discovery was exciting, but also somewhat surprising to me because I was shocked that I had never heard anyone talk about Anglican chant before. However, I soon realized that there aren't that many people who A, attend a church at which Anglican chant is sung, and B, also care enough about church music to discuss Anglican chant with me. So why use Anglican chant as a medium for discussing different political, social, and environmental issues? Well, I wanted to try to bring the genre into a secular context, and by doing so, I hope to create opportunities for a greater number of people to be exposed to this style of music. For many people, this would mean introducing them to the genre for the very first time. But I also wanted to explore whether Anglican chant can be used to effectively make a statement about a given issue, or whether it is only suited for reciting religious texts. Now, when writing my own chants, the first thing I always did was write a chord progression. A standard Anglican chant is 7 measures long and follows a very specific pattern that determines the basic structure of chord changes. However, there are far fewer constraints concerning the harmonic structure of the chant, provided that it generally follows standard voice leading practices, which make each of the 4 voice parts flow smoothly. Now, there's not really a specific process that I followed when writing these chord progressions. I would just noodle around on the organ until I had something that I liked, and then I would transcribe that basic outline into an online notation software in order to refine it more. Listen as I play the chord progression that's here on the screen. There you have it. So writing these sorts of chord progressions was generally like the easiest part of the process for me, because next I had to pick an actual topic and write lyrics for the chant. Now, when it came to picking a topic, I usually spent a lot of time contemplating all of the things that I want to change about the world. And as it turns out, there are a lot of things that I want to change. So in order to narrow down the list some, I often turned to my friends in Honors Humanities for insight and inspiration, and they were always full of great ideas. In this chant in particular, many of the lyrics are derived from the things that my friends had to say about consumerism. So let me read the lyrics to you real quick. The protection and promotion of consumer interests encourages increasing amounts of goods and services to be acquired. New products are released every day, creating a surplus of things that we don't need. Importance is placed on items and money, which fosters a culture that is heavily focused on wealth. It is hard to escape the trap, just as trying to cut off one head only makes two more grow back. We think that we are buying to live, but often we are just living to buy. Now, each numbered line is a verse that makes its way through the chord progression once. But if you just look at these lyrics as they are, it's impossible to know where in the verse you're supposed to move to the next chord. So that's why the next step in this process is to add pointing. Pointing is the system that's used to indicate where note changes should occur in the text. There's not necessarily a correct way to point a text, but if you'll remember from before, the goal is for the rhythm of the text to mimic the natural cadence of speech. So the easiest way to do this is by speaking the text aloud, and that's exactly what I did. And over time, it even became intuitive. I would envision the pointing as I was writing the lyrics, so it was kind of a process that happened simultaneously. Now, my original plan was to get some friends together to record these chants at church, but because the semester unfolded as it did, that plan had to change. Now, I'm lucky enough to come from a wonderful family of musicians who were willing to help me record instead, and we each recorded our parts individually. And then my dad taught me how to use music editing software, so that way I could try to make it sound like we had actually recorded together as an ensemble in an acoustic that was somewhat similar to a church. So this is the chant on consumerism that we've been looking at, and it's one of my favorites in the collection. So here's what this sounds like.
The protection and promotion of consumer interests encourages increasing amounts of goods and services to be acquired. New products are released every day, creating a surplus of things that we don't need. Importance is placed on items and money, which fosters a culture that is heavily focused on wealth. It is hard to escape the trap, just as trying to cut off one head only makes two more grow back. We think that we are buying to live, but often we are just living to buy.
So this recording, along with all of the others that I've made, is posted on my website. And I created this website as a way to compile my work and allow for it to be easily accessible to a wide audience. I didn't have any previous experience with website design, but for this project, I used Google Sites, and I found that it was very easy to navigate. And I've included a link to the website at the bottom of the screen here, so be sure to check it out if you're interested and you want to hear more of what I've done. Other topics that I've addressed through Chant include climate change, food insecurity, overcrowding, and the wage gap. Just as with any project, there are plenty of things that I've learned throughout this process. However, one of my biggest takeaways from this project is that Anglican chant can indeed be adapted to fit a secular context. By design, special emphasis is placed on the text in Anglican chant, so the message of the chant is always in the foreground. Obviously, this genre will always carry some sort of religious connotation, but I found that the actual content of the chant is the most important factor in determining whether or not it is perceived as secular. To that end, I've also found that Anglican chant can be used to effectively make a statement about a given issue. Yes, you could argue that it's a kind of ridiculous way to go about taking a stand on an issue, but almost everyone who has heard one of my chants that I've written has had a similar reaction. They laugh at the way that the information is being presented to them, but they also listen really closely because they're intrigued, it's new, they've never heard something like this before, and they want to understand every word. Now, it's kind of a foolproof way to get people to listen to what you have to say, in my opinion. Now, I certainly don't believe that Anglican chant can miraculously solve every problem in the world, but there's only one way to change the world, and that's one chord change at a time. Thank you.